I used to believe that anger was how I kept from being disrespected, that it was the only response when someone crossed the line. But the truth is, every time I screamed, slammed things, or spat out cruel words, I didn't gain respect. I just lost more of myself. My wife walked out in the middle of a rainy night, holding our child. My coworkers stopped talking to me. My daughter looked at me like I was a stranger. Every time the rage passed, all I felt was emptiness, shame, and total helplessness. I didn't want to be that man. I wasn't born to be an emotional bomb, but I didn't know any other way to survive until I learned one thing from Stoicism. Anger doesn't come from the world, it comes from how we react to it. And you can learn to react differently. If you've ever lost control, ever hurt the ones you love because of a moment of rage, watch this video all the way through, because in the next few minutes, you'll learn how to stop being a victim of your own anger. What you're about to hear next could change the way you see your entire life. Hit subscribe, like, and stay with me, because the final minutes will be the most important. I used to wield anger like a weapon, not to attack, but to survive. In my mind, anger was the only way to hold on to some shred of control when everything around me felt like it was collapsing. My wife argued, my kid cried, my job weighed on my neck, and out there the whole damn world felt like it was judging me every second. I couldn't think straight back then. I only knew one thing. If I didn't push back, I'd get trampled. So I yelled, I growled, I slammed the table, the door, threw things. That feeling, it was like finally breathing, like taking the wheel back, like forcing people to shut up and listen. And I thought I was being strong. I thought I was in control. But I wasn't. I was panicking. I was losing control, but I didn't want anyone to know I was losing control. So I disguised it with rage. I bottled everything up until I exploded, like a homemade bomb. I used anger to hide my helplessness, to mask the feeling of being small and voiceless. And I did it over and over, long enough that I mistook it for instinct. But anger isn't instinct, it's a choice. And I kept choosing it, again and again. Every time I got angry, I pushed people back a step. I made them shut up, step aside, back off. But I didn't realize, the more people backed off, the more alone I stood. I didn't see that right away. Because when you're angry, you hear nothing. You just want to win. You just want control. But control over what? When you can't even stay calm during a conversation with someone who loves you? I didn't ask myself that question until the people closest to me finally went quiet for real. Not out of respect, but because they didn't want to engage anymore. They didn't want to argue, didn't want to correct me. They stepped away. And that's when I started to feel the cold. Not from the air, but from the invisible distance growing between me and the people I used to be closest to. And I realized, anger never brings people closer. It's the fastest way to drive them away. Looking back, I know I used anger like a last-ditch form of power. But it wasn't power. It was fear wearing the mask of strength. It was the growl of a wounded animal. It was my way of saving face, while inside, I was a mess of burning wires and short circuits. And I kept doing it until I realized people weren't afraid of me anymore. They were just avoiding me. They weren't listening. They were pulling away. They didn't argue, didn't push back. They just faded. And by the time I needed a hand, no one was close enough to offer one. I'll talk more about that in the next part. The moment I finally saw it, anger didn't make me intimidating. It made me isolated. People didn't respect me. They tolerated me until they had a reason to leave. And when they left, no one looked back. Stick around, because the next part is when I finally realized the true cost of anger isn't one big argument. It's every relationship slowly cracking over the years. And just like I said, no one ever looks back. It wasn't until I was sitting there in a house silent as the grave that I finally felt the cold. That's when it hit. Not the question of whether I was right or wrong, but how the hell did I end up here alone? And then I started piecing it together. Every time I snapped, my wife went silent. Every time I lashed out, my kid took a step back. Every time I lost control, my coworkers avoided eye contact. No one reacted anymore. because they had learned that silence was the only way to avoid being caught in my storm. I thought I had authority. I thought I was a man with a voice. But no, I was just becoming someone people had to walk on eggshells around. That's not respect, that's fear. I didn't have influence, I had impact. And you know it, those two things may look similar, but they're worlds apart. People admire you when they trust you, when they respect you, when they want to learn from you, but people tread carefully around you when they feel threatened, when they can't speak freely, when they don't dare to get close, when they're not afraid of consequences, but afraid of you. That distance, it doesn't show up overnight. It's not like a shouting match where someone storms out. It creeps in, slowly, quietly, but surely. First they stop chatting as much. Then they avoid your gaze. Then they stop initiating anything at all. And eventually, they're just present, but no longer involved. And you start living in a shell of your own making without even realizing it. You think you're the pillar, but really, you're just a steel post in the middle of the yard that everyone walks around. And the irony? At that point, I started blaming them. I said, "Why did you change? Why doesn't the kid feel close to me anymore? Why don't my coworkers talk to me like they used to?" But I never stopped to ask, how did I respond every time they did try to talk to me? Did I make them feel safe? Or did I jump down their throat the moment they made a mistake? Rage, sarcasm, control. The most painful part was realizing I was the reason they pulled away. It wasn't that they changed, that I created an environment where honesty couldn't survive. They didn't feel safe giving feedback. They didn't even feel safe breathing too loud. Everything became fake. And I told myself, I'm fine, when in reality, I was being pushed out of the lives of the people I loved most. That's the silent but brutal cost of anger. It doesn't kill anyone instantly. It erodes, little by little, until no one wants to come near you anymore. I'm not saying this to complain. I'm saying it because if someone else is caught in this same loop, then you need to understand this one truth. Anger doesn't make you more valuable. It doesn't make people respect you more. It just slowly isolates you, and no one will tell you it's happening. And if you're starting to feel out of place, in your own family, at work, in relationships that used to be close, don't rush to blame anyone. Look again. Look at the eyes of the people across from you when you get angry. What do they say? Are they pushing back? Or are they pulling away? Are they silent because they understand? Or because they're afraid? And if you've ever seen that look of fear, especially from your own child, then you need to listen carefully to the next part, because that was the moment I truly broke. Not because of loss, but because I realized I had planted something in my child's mind that they will carry for the rest of their life. And no apology on earth could ever fully erase that. I'll tell you everything, in detail, no filters, no hiding, so that if you're walking the same path I once did, you'll know when to stop before it's too damn late. This isn't just a video. This is the reminder you needed today. Hit subscribe and like if you want someone in your corner, pushing you to live by your real values. I still remember that moment clearly, and I don't think I'll ever forget it. That night, I came home from work, head spinning, projects piling up, a client had just canceled a contract, my boss chewed me out on the phone during the drive home. The moment I walked through the door, I heard my child crying. My wife was exhausted, trying to calm her down. She saw me and simply said one ordinary sentence. "Can you give her a bath for me?" Just that, a completely normal sentence. But I wasn't normal anymore. I snapped. I barked back. "You've been home all day and you can't even take care of her?" Before I even finished the sentence, my child went dead silent. Like the cry had been yanked out of her throat, she froze. Her eyes wide open, not blinking. Couldn't blink. Her mouth still twisted in mid-cry, frozen in place. That look she gave me, I don't even know how to describe it properly. It wasn't the look of a kid getting scolded. It was sheer terror. The kind of fear that shuts down a child's ability to react. As if I wasn't her father anymore, but some strange, dangerous creature about to do something awful. And I just stood there, frozen. I had never been stopped cold by someone's eyes like that. Not by a boss, not by a client, but by my own 3-year-old daughter. I didn't dare step toward her. I didn't know what to say. My wife picked her up and walked to the bedroom. No blame, no words, just silence. And it was that silence that cut deepest. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment. It was cold. It was distance. I sat there alone, and for the first time, I didn't make excuses for myself. No, I'm just tired. No, I didn't mean it. Because for the first time, I had seen the consequence of my rage with my own eyes. Not some broken object, not a shouting match, not getting fired, but a fracture in a child's trust. I kept thinking about that look. It haunted me for nights, and I started to understand. I didn't have to hit her, didn't have to scream horrible words, didn't have to roar in her face. Just that one moment was enough to shatter her sense of safety. And she'll remember it. She'll carry that fear with her as she grows. She'll learn, Dad is someone to avoid when he's angry. She'll start to keep her distance. And one day, when I need love from her, she may no longer be close enough to give it. That moment was the first time I felt ashamed to my core. Not toward anyone else, but toward myself. Toward that image I had painted of being the devoted father. I tore it down. I didn't deserve it. I sat for a long time in that dark room, not thinking, just bearing the weight of having lost something incredibly precious, unsure if I could ever get it back. I wasn't looking for forgiveness. I just wanted to understand. How do I avoid becoming the kind of father whose child grows up guarded? And from that moment on, I began the search for an answer. Not some feel-good self-help slogans, but a real framework of thought, one that could make a man like me, hot-tempered, proud, full of excuses, finally stop and face himself. I didn't find it online. I found it in words that had been around for over 1,000 years. Stoicism. No fluff, no promises, just cold, hard truth. And that cold was exactly what I needed at that time. And in the next part, I'll share with you exactly what Stoicism teaches about emotion, about anger, about control, and why, if you truly grasp just one core idea, you'll never see your anger the same way again. After that night, I started to notice things more. I wasn't exploding like before, but the damage was still there. It lived in the way my child averted her eyes when I walked in the room, in the way my wife spoke, short, careful, emotionally flat, in the 3-person dinners where no one held eye contact for more than 5 seconds. No one yelled, no one argued. But the air was so thick that even setting a pair of chopsticks down made a sound you could feel. And I knew this wasn't peace. This was the quiet of caution. The silence of people who had learned to shrink themselves just to avoid one thing, my reactions. Loneliness doesn't show up loudly. It doesn't knock. It doesn't announce itself. It seeps in, into meals, into evenings. At some point, I realized I didn't know how to talk to my wife about anything besides the electric bill, school fees, has the kid eaten. The questions that showed care disappeared. So did the gentle touches, the shared smiles. And I, who once believed I was the man holding this family together, was sitting in my own home, feeling like a stranger. That's when I finally understood. What I destroyed wasn't just a few arguments. I had severed the emotional rhythm, the shared heartbeat that once tied us together. Every time I lost my temper, I snipped another thread. I didn't see it right away, because people were still around. But little by little, that bond unraveled, like a shirt slowly coming apart at the seams from the inside. It still looked intact, but it no longer warmed anyone. I remember one time sitting down to play with my kid, and she kept watching me, not with joy, not with comfort. She looked at me like she was waiting to see if I'd snap, and there I was, smiling, trying to get close, but in her mind, I was still the shadow of all the times I'd lost it. I wasn't safe anymore. I didn't blame her. I didn't blame my wife. I knew full well they had put up with me for far too long. They hadn't left because they still cared. But that love had taken a new form. It wasn't natural anymore. It had turned into distance for self-protection. That loneliness, it's not the kind that comes from having no one around. It's the kind that comes from having people beside you who are no longer truly with you. They live with you, but not together with you. That's when I woke up. Not the "I'll be better so they forgive me" kind of wake up. Not "I'll soften up so they'll love me again." No, I realized I needed to do something so I wouldn't get left behind by the very people I loved most. I needed to learn how to reconnect. Not with apologies, but with real deep change. I understood that if I kept letting emotions drag me every time things went wrong, if I kept reacting on impulse instead of reflection, then sooner or later, I would lose everything. Not through one big blow-up, but through hundreds, thousands of tiny cracks spread across years. And if I wanted to repair what I'd severed, if I wanted my child to one day look at me again with trust, I had to start from within. I had to learn how to stay calm when everything in me wanted to explode. I had to learn to respond differently. I turned to Stoicism, not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. I needed a system that was real. No fluff, no poetic spiritualism, no imaginary meditations. A real code of life for a man who wants to master himself. And in the next part, I'll tell you this. What scared me most wasn't the rage. It was realizing that people were pulling away, growing colder, slipping further and further, while I couldn't do a damn thing to stop it. Unless I changed from the root. And I'll show you exactly which core Stoic principle helped me break free from that cycle. Not everyone has the patience to watch until the end, but those who do are always the ones who go further than the rest. If you're one of them, subscribe and like. We're on the same team. At first, the loneliness just simmered in the background. But eventually, it stopped being a feeling and became reality. You start to feel like the entire world is quietly pulling away and no one sent you the memo. As if everyone else got the message, except you. And one by one, they begin to step back. They don't leave right away. There's no dramatic blow-up. It just happens slowly. They stop asking how you are, stop sharing things, stop talking unless it's necessary. They still eat dinner with you, still sit in the same room, still answer when spoken to, but their voices are flat, cautious, measured, like they're dealing with a sleeping volcano no one dares to stir. That feeling, it's not the same as being hated. It's being shut out of people's emotional lives. You're no longer someone they turn to, not a place where they can be vulnerable, honest, or simply themselves. And once you lose that place in the hearts of the people closest to you, consider it lost. I used to think they needed me. I used to see myself as the center of the family, the provider, the decision maker. But then I started noticing fewer people asked for my input. Fewer people came to me for help. My wife handled everything herself. My child asked her mom. Life kept moving, but I was no longer a part of it. And no one said a word. I was sitting inside my house, but I felt like I was standing outside the front door. Life kept going. People kept living. But the system didn't need me to function anymore. I was just a shadow, still there, but no longer involved. And if you've ever felt like a stranger in your own home, you know exactly what I'm talking about. No one pushed back against you anymore, but no one wanted to open up to you either. Because they tried once, and what did they get in return? Rage? That cold stare? A sentence sharp enough to cut them in half? Connection? It doesn't break because of one big thing. It dies from 1,000 little things you don't even notice. Every time you raised your voice, they spoke a little less. Every time you barked an order, they backed off just a bit more. Every time you showed them you couldn't handle their truth, they learned to hide it. And eventually, they forgot how to share with you at all. And then I realized, I wasn't just being pulled out of their lives, I was being pulled out of myself. I didn't recognize who I was anymore. Every conversation felt like a command. Everyone else always seemed wrong. I always felt like I had to correct, to teach, to control. I was no longer the man I once wanted to become. I wasn't gentle. I didn't listen. No one felt safe around me anymore. And if I kept living that way, they wouldn't just step back. They would disappear. For good. Not in some explosive argument where someone storms out, but from the heart. They'd still live with me, but deep down I'd no longer matter to them. And that is more terrifying than any fight could ever be. I had to face that with full awareness. No blaming, no excuses, no justifications. I knew I had to change, but not with a few promises. Not with, I'll try to calm down more. I tried that. It wasn't enough. I needed a real code to live by. Something solid enough to grip when my mind was about to explode. A mental framework strong enough to hold me steady in the middle of emotional chaos. And that's when I turned to Stoicism. Not out of curiosity, but because there was nowhere else left to turn. And in the next part, I'll share the very first principle that pulled me back from the edge. One simple line, but it completely changed the way I saw every angry moment in my life. And if you listen closely, I believe it can do the same for you. After everything I'd been through, the moments of losing control, the fearful stares, the growing coldness, I realized this: if I didn't understand the true nature of anger, I would never escape it. I could apologize as many times as I wanted, it wouldn't matter. I could try staying quiet, try holding it in, it still wouldn't be enough. Because the problem isn't whether I get angry or not. The problem is, do I truly understand what anger is? And for the first time, I came across something that stopped me in my tracks. In a page written by Epictetus, he said, "People don't make you angry. It's your interpretation of what happens that makes you angry." That sentence looks simple on the surface, but it hit me deep. I sat there for a long time thinking about it. I replayed every time I'd lost it, every time I'd exploded. I blamed others. I thought it was because they were rude, because they didn't respect me, because they didn't understand me. But now I saw it clearly. They just did something. I was the one who gave it meaning. And the meaning I gave it, it was negative. It was soaked in bias. It was fueled by exhaustion, by ego, by past wounds I hadn't healed. And that layer of interpretation is what created the anger. One simple sentence, "Don't forget the school meeting tomorrow." The person who said it was just reminding me. But in my head I heard, "You're careless, you never do anything right. You can't even remember a damn parent-teacher meeting." I didn't hear what was actually said. I heard the version in my own head. And that's what I reacted to. That was the first thing Stoicism taught me, and it became the foundation of everything I practiced after. That the events out there don't control how I feel. My perception of those events, that is what determines my response. Epictetus called it the power to choose your reaction. It's the ultimate power. And it's a power no person and no situation can take away from you, if you're clear-headed enough to recognize it. And once I understood this, I stopped being afraid of my own anger. It no longer felt like some invisible monster crashing down on me whenever something went wrong. It was just a chain reaction, one I could step outside of and observe. And if I could observe it, I could interrupt it. I used to think that not getting angry meant I was suppressing, that it meant I was weak, that I was letting people walk all over me. But Stoicism showed me that calm isn't the absence of feeling, it's the ability to understand what's worth reacting to and what isn't. I realized that anger wasn't some demon inside me like I once believed. It was just the result of a process. Something happens, I interpret it negatively, I don't stop, and then I blow up. And if I wanted to live differently, I didn't need to eliminate anger. I just had to break the chain at the second step, the interpretation. Instead of, "She's disrespecting me," I asked, "Is she just exhausted?" Instead of, "That guy's being rude," I stopped and thought, "Haven't I misjudged people before?" Just by shifting the lens, I shifted my response, not by suppressing, but by understanding. And after doing that a few times, I began to take back the steering wheel of my life. I was no longer provoked. No one else held the remote to my emotions. And for the first time in years, I felt truly strong. In the next part, I'll show you the exact key that helped me turn this understanding into action. That is, how to stay clear-headed when your brain is on fire. With one very clear principle, so simple that any man can use it. Just remember it, apply it, and you'll control your reactions no matter what. I'll walk you through it next. When I began to realize that anger doesn't appear out of nowhere, that it's the result of how I interpret things, what I needed to learn next was how to separate what's happening on the outside from the reaction rising on the inside. And this is exactly where Stoicism truly woke me up. Marcus Aurelius said something I think every man who's ever lost control needs to hear clearly. If it's not within your control, don't let it occupy your mind. Simple, but sharp like a blade. I started to see clearly. Something happens, and that's all it is. Something that happened. Someone says something, does something, shows an attitude. It's all just neutral events. But what makes us explode isn't the event itself, it's the meaning we assign to it. We're the ones lighting the fire, and then we sit in the burning house screaming for help. Before this, I used to mix everything together. Events, interpretation, emotions, reactions, all tangled into one giant mess. If something went against me, I'd react instantly, with no pause to even check what was really pulling my strings. But Stoicism taught me, insert a gap. That gap is where I get to choose whether to react or not. Strength or weakness doesn't lie in the emotion, it lies in that split second where I have the courage to stop and choose wisely. I started building a new habit, breaking every situation down into two clear parts. 1, the event. 2, the reaction. The event is, my wife said I never listen. My old reaction was to snap, what did you just say? When have I not listened? But the new reaction, I pause, I separate her sentence from the feeling of being attacked. I ask in a lower tone, in what way do you feel I haven't been listening? And I actually want to hear the answer. That's it. No shouting, no damage, no escalation. I'm not suppressing, I'm not bottling anything. I'm just awake. And I started to realize that's where the real power is. Not in yelling, not in control, but in owning the way I respond to the world. Bit by bit, I stopped being a button that anyone could push to make me snap. I stopped letting people dictate how I felt. I stopped letting some minor irritation in my day become a full-blown argument that ruined my whole week. I began to feel grounded. The kind of grounded that doesn't need to act tough. Strength that comes from within. And I swear, any man who's felt that knows exactly what I mean. It makes you feel like you've truly grown up. I stopped being afraid of losing control because I knew I now had the tools to hold on to myself. But to pull this off in the real world, especially when you're angry, exhausted, frustrated, you have to train. Talking nice isn't enough. So in the next part, I'll share exactly how I practice this as a daily habit. No theory, no fluff. Just the way I applied it to go from being impulsive to becoming a man who stays calm without ever feeling weaker. If you want to learn how to control your reactions like a real man, then the next part is one you can't afford to skip. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you find this video helpful. It's the best way to support me in creating more valuable content. A lot of people think Stoicism is about suppressing emotions, like clenching your fists and holding in your anger just to get through the moment. It's not. What Stoicism taught me isn't suppression. It's mastery. It's not about running from emotions, it's about facing them head-on and deciding how I will deal with them. I don't want to live like a bomb that explodes whenever someone presses the wrong button. But I also don't want to be the guy who swallows everything in silence and quietly loses his mind. I want to be calm with real strength, not forcing myself to look okay. So how do you actually control your emotions? For me, there are 3 things I started practicing every day. First, observation. Every time I feel an emotion rising, especially when my heartbeat speeds up, my face tightens, my voice starts to sharpen, I don't act right away. I simply say to myself in my head, this is anger. It's rising. Hold on. Just being able to name the emotion already gives me one step of distance from it. Like seeing smoke, not panicking, but stepping back to see where it's coming from, if there's actually a fire. Observation is the first step to control. Second, asking questions. I ask myself 3 simple ones. Is this really that serious? Is it worth ruining the family atmosphere over? Am I even angry at the right person? Usually by the second question, I've already let go of 70% of the emotion, because I realize most anger is just my own mind blowing things out of proportion. Someone says one thing, I hear it as 10, and I react to the 10, not the truth. Third, I practice with the small stuff first. I don't wait for an argument with my wife or a clash at work to start applying this. I train with everyday things, traffic jams, spilled coffee, a crying baby, someone giving me a rude reply. These small moments are my training ground. I remind myself, this is a chance to practice calm. If I react differently, that means I'm improving. And every time I manage to redirect my emotional response, it feels like I've won a fight without throwing a single punch. The best part is, Once I got good at responding differently to small things, I wasn't the explosive type anymore when bigger things came up. I got used to pausing, observing, handling. I started responding instead of reacting. And that response, it came from reason, not impulse. It was still direct, still clear. But it didn't cause damage. It didn't make people back away. I remember one day my kid spilled a glass of water on my laptop. Before, I would have flipped out. But that day, I just stayed silent, took a deep breath and said, "Do you understand what you did wrong? Be more careful next time." Then I wiped down the laptop. Not one raised voice. My wife looked at me. My kid looked at me. No one said a word. But I knew that moment, everyone in the room saw that I had changed, and I myself felt, for the first time, I had become the man I always wanted to be. Calm, grounded, strong enough to earn respect without ever having to raise my voice. And that didn't come from the heavens. It came from training, every day, in every small moment. From learning to see emotions like passing clouds and letting them drift. From daring to step away from the default reaction and choose a different response, one that's kinder, sharper, smarter. There was one thing I had to relearn from scratch: how to be respected as a man without having to raise my voice, without slamming the table, without threats or commands. I used to think strength meant being loud, asserting dominance, making others fear they would listen. But the more I lived, the more loss I experienced, the clearer I saw. People might fear you, but no one truly respects a man who can't control himself. I used to mistake aggression for power, but in truth, it's the clearest sign of weakness. A man who can't manage his emotions, who can't control his words when he's angry, who doesn't know when to stop, even when he sees fear in the other person's eyes. No matter how much money he earns, he's not a pillar of strength. And when you're not a pillar, you'll eventually be pushed out of the trust of your wife and children. That's what I began rebuilding. Inner strength. Not through fancy words. Not through gestures meant to make up for it after hurting someone. But by changing, at the root, how I show up every single day. Through my expression, my tone, my eye contact, the way I handle even the smallest things. I choose to stay quiet when it counts. I choose to hear the whole sentence. I choose not to reply when I'm still heated. I choose to pause, then respond. Short, clear, without edge, without sarcasm. I started living like the man I used to wish I had when I was a kid. A father who doesn't scream when his child spills water. A husband who doesn't slam the door and leave in the middle of an argument. A family anchor that people don't tiptoe around, but turn to when they need clarity. And I saw clearly that kind of change. My family didn't have to praise it, but they felt it. My wife began speaking more freely. My kid came closer, not because I was being gentle, but because I no longer threatened their emotional safety like I used to. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "True strength is the ability to keep your mind steady amidst chaos." And I understood. A man's strength isn't in muscles, titles, or a deep voice. It's in the ability to stay unmoved by emotions like a child would be. A real adult is someone who doesn't get triggered easily. I train for that every day, not to be praised by anyone, but so I can look at myself in the mirror without shame. And slowly, I realized I didn't need people to withdraw anymore, because I was no longer intimidating. But I didn't need pity either, because I was strong enough, steady enough to keep my household in peace. And from that calm, I began reconnecting, not through apologies, but through action. Repeatedly, a little each day, by no longer causing pain, because sometimes rebuilding trust doesn't come from doing more, but from removing what once made others put their guard up. In the final part, I'll talk about the most important thing, how to reconnect with your family, not through promises, but by living differently every day. Because if you were the one who broke something, you can also be the one to rebuild it. But this time, it has to come from inner character, not outer performance. I'll show you exactly how I did it, step by step. I used to think saying I'm sorry would fix everything. That as long as I was willing to back down, speak gently, my wife would soften. My child would run into my arms like nothing had ever happened. But reality doesn't work like that. No one trusts a man who shouted yesterday and speaks sweetly today. No one opens up to someone who hurts, apologizes, and then hurts again. Especially the ones who once loved you deeply. They go the most silent when their hearts grow cold. I had to face that. Face the raw truth that words can't patch up the cracks that my behavior caused. My wife didn't need to hear me say, "I'll change again." She needed to see if I actually had. My child didn't need me to ask, "Do you forgive Dad?" She just needed to feel that her father was now someone she could come close to without flinching. So I changed the way I reconnected. I didn't start with conversation. I started with action. Small, steady, without asking for feedback, without needing credit. I didn't snap when my kids spilled something. I didn't show irritation when my wife disagreed with me. I let them see I was different, not just today, but day after day. Steady, stable, bit by bit. I let my kid choose the meal without correcting her or getting annoyed when she hesitated. I washed the dishes when I saw my wife exhausted, without her having to ask. I didn't lash out when things at work went wrong. I learned to take a deep breath before saying something I'd regret. And slowly, I could feel the tension at home. Ease. Not instantly, not dramatically, but enough to notice. My child started hugging me a little longer. My wife started asking me questions that had nothing to do with money or responsibilities. We had conversations that weren't about blame or who was right, but simply about being close again. And I realized there's no warmer feeling than this, when the people who once guarded themselves against you start to lower their defenses. Not because they've been convinced, but because they feel safe again. I no longer hope to get back what we had. Truth is, I don't want to. I want something new. A way of living where I'm the kind of man who stays connected without harming those he loves, even when he's in pain. And if you're someone who feels yourself growing distant from the people who once felt closest, don't try to pull them back with words. They don't need to hear you anymore. They need to see. See you staying quiet at the right time. See you softening instead of tensing up. See you behaving differently, repeatedly, calmly, without force. Because real change doesn't need a speech. It proves itself in how grounded you are in the tiniest moments of everyday life. And if by now you realize you've shattered something, let me tell you straight. You're not alone. I've been there, but I also made it through. And if I could, so can you. You don't need to become perfect. You just need to show up every day, a little better, a little stronger, in quiet persistence. That's what rebuilds everything. I'll wrap up this whole journey with one final, grounded conclusion. So if you're looking for a direction, at least you'll know where to start. And know this for sure. No one is too broken to begin again. No one is too far gone to take back control. Clear from the heart. If you've made it this far, and you've seen yourself somewhere in this story, then I don't need to say much more. You know what I'm talking about. You know the feeling of anger followed by regret, of yelling, then going silent, of looking strong on the outside while inside you're in chaos, lonely, stuck, lost. I've been there, and I'm not here to judge you. I just want to tell you one thing. You're not alone. If you've ever lost your temper and seen fear in your child's eyes, I understand. If you've ever watched your wife turn away in silence, I've been there too. If you've ever told yourself, I don't want to keep living like this, then start right now with this exact moment. Start by stopping. Start by looking in. Start by having the courage to face yourself. I'm not saying Stoicism will make you the perfect man, but if you let it speak to you and live with it little by little, it will give you back something you lost a long time ago, the power to own yourself. And once you have that, you'll know how to rebuild what was broken. If this video struck something in you, don't stay silent. Leave a comment. Tell your story. Who knows, maybe another man out there needs to hear exactly that to stop himself from giving up. And if you want to walk this path with me, hit subscribe, share the video. We don't need to say much. We just need to keep showing up for each other so we can rise steady again. Every day, quietly, but unshakably. Thank you for being here. If you found this video helpful, subscribe, turn on notifications, and like this video. Don't forget to leave a comment so we can spread positivity together.